Hi, welcome back to Hungry Hearts Church in Jackson, Tennessee. We're going to start right now with the Aaronic blessing, and then we'll move on with our usual blessings. That's what I'm trying to say. Yivareka Adonai v'yishmereka, Ya'er Adonai panavileka v'yehuneka, Yisa Adonai panavileka v'yasam laka shalom. Ramu Adonai Eloheinu, V'hishtakavu lahar kadsho ki kadosh Adonai Eloheinu. Exalt the Lord our God and worship at his holy mountain, for the Lord our God is holy. Psalms 99:9. And now we're going to say the vote. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu, V'Elohei Avotenu, V'Emotenu, Elohei Avraham, Elohei Yitzchak, V'Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel, V'Elohei Leah. Ha'el Hagadol Hagabor V'Hanara, El Elyon Gomel Kasadim Tovim, V'Konei Hakol V'Zoker Kasadei Avot V'Emahot. Ume vi Gedula Livnei V'Nehem Laman Shamo Ba'ahava. Maleko Zir Umashia Umagain Baruch atah Adonai Magain Avraham V'Yizrat Seirah. So I am Eldress Barbara Dickerson, and I'm the Eldress really down in Corinth, Mississippi, and I come up on the second Sabbath of every month and also speak in Jackson. So today I want to speak about what idols do you worship. So to give you an idea of how much the Lord hates you worshiping other idols, I've decided to start in Exodus 4. Now, Egypt wasn't just a land of pyramids and pharaohs. It was a land saturated with idols. I mean, they had idols for everything. So when Moses came to Egypt, and God sent him there to ask for the sons of Israel to be released to him, he was refused. They worshipped the Nile River, and this androgynous god was worshipped as a giver of life, and his name was Hepket. So there was one other thing that was done right before the Nile River, and I'm just going to start with Exodus 4:8. Adonai said to Moses and Aaron, when Pharaoh says to you, perform a miracle, to Aaron to take his staff and throw it down in front of Pharaoh so that it can become a snake. Moses and Aaron went to the Pharaoh and did this as Adonai had ordered. But I'm going to skip on down to 11. But Pharaoh in turn called for the sages and sorcerers, and they too, the magicians of Egypt, did the same thing, making use of their secret arts. Remember that, secret arts. Each one threw his staff down, and they turned into snakes, but Aaron's staff swallowed up theirs. Nevertheless, Pharaoh was made hard-hearted, and he didn't listen to them, as Adonai had said he would happen. Adonai said to Moses, Pharaoh is stubborn. He refused to let the people go. Go to Pharaoh in the morning, and when he comes out to the water, stand on the riverbank to confront him. Take in your hand the staff which was turned into a snake, and say to him, Adonai, the God of the Hebrews, sent me to say to you, let my people go, so that they can worship me in the desert. But until now you haven't listened. So Adonai says, this will let you know that I am Adonai. I will take the staff in my hand and strike the water in the river, and it will be turned into blood. The fish in the river will die, the river will stink, and the Egyptians won't want to drink water from the river. So as you may understand, God was starting his targeted attack against Egypt's false gods. I also just want to point out here that the god of the Nile River, Hepkat, was also portrayed as a hippo, a man with a hippo head. And he was considered to bring a giver of life. He was credited with the silt being pushed up onto the edge of the river so that they could use that as basically as a really good dirt. And also that he was credited with for the fish in the Nile and the drinkable water. So God started with one of their biggest gods. So when God first sent Moses to Pharaoh and asked for the people to come to the desert to attend the festival that he wanted them to go to, and Moses was denied, God began the assault on each of the idols that the Egyptian people held most dear. Next was the frogs. In Exodus 7:25, 7 days later, after Adonai had struck the river, Adonai said to Moses, "Go to Pharaoh and say to him, 'Let my people go, so that they may worship me.' If you refuse to let them go, I will strike all your territory with frogs. The river will swim with frogs." In ancient Egypt mythology, the frog goddess is named Heket, also spelled Heket. She is the goddess associated with fertility, childbirth, and rebirth, and is often depicted as a frog or a woman with the head of a frog. These frogs were everywhere. The Egyptian people could not do anything for all the frogs. Now, I'm not saying, it's like these people could get out a bowl to start kneading bread, and suddenly there was a frog in there. I don't know about you, but frogs are kind of disgusting to me. But then I lived in Florida, and I would come home, and they would be like all over your front door in the front of your house and just stuck there. And these were frogs. These were not toads. These were frogs, those little green things, with the wide toes. And it actually living there was what made me have this aversion to the frogs, was coming home and seeing this thing stuck all over the house. So I can kind of understand now these people suddenly had these things everywhere. That wasn't enough for Pharaoh, so he hardened his heart again. The people of Egypt were so afflicted that Pharaoh actually asked Moses to pray for the relief of his people. So in verse 8, as we go on, 4 verse 8, the Pharaoh summoned Moses and Aaron and said, "Intercede with Adonai to take the frogs away from my people, and I will let you go and sacrifice." So of course, then Moses answered back, "Not only will I let you have the honor of naming the time when I will pray for you, your servants and your people, to be rid of the frogs, both yourselves and your homes, and that they stay only in the river." He says, I'm going to let you set the time. So he answered, "Tomorrow. Do it tomorrow." And Moses said, "It will be as if you said. And from this you will learn that Adonai God has no equal. The frogs will leave you and your homes, also your servants and your people. They will stay in the river only." So they left, and then the next day, Moses prays. Adonai listens. I'm paraphrasing here because reading it is very wordy. But the frogs died. But, they didn't die in the river. They died in place. So now they had all these stinky dead frogs everywhere, and they had to clean them up and, get rid of them. So it's still kind of like he stuck his tongue at Pharaoh about that. And because it literally, the whole land just stunk. But when Pharaoh saw that he had been given some relief, he doubled down, as we like to say when someone gets real hard-nosed about something. And he decided, no, I'm not letting you go worship in the desert. And a lot of us will pray for something we'll get an answer, and it's good, and we promptly forget what we told God we would do. We all do that. I've done it. I don't mind telling you, I've done it. I had a big surgery one time. I was getting blood. I was miserable. I made a promise to God if he would just, save me and stop the bleeding and so on and so forth, I would do such and forth for him. And then I promptly forgot it as soon as I got out of the hospital. But I will tell you, God took care of that promise for me, and it did come to pass. But it wasn't by my own effort. I had made the promise, he carried it out. So if you promise God something, you better be ready for him to carry it out for you if you don't keep your promise yourself. Now, Adonai again spoke to Moses in Exodus 8:12. He says, reach out your staff and strike the dust of the ground, and it will become lice throughout all of Egypt. And they did it, and Aaron reached out his hand with his staff, and he struck the dust on the ground, and there was lice on people and animals. All the dust on the ground became lice. Have you ever had lice? Because it's like the most itchy, disgusting thing. As a nurse, I could put up with a lot of things, but when they said a kid had lice or another adult had lice, I dressed out head to toe to try to keep any of that lice from getting on me. It was more horrible than anything else you could imagine. And I wasn't the only one. Every nurse you'll ever meet, you say lice to them, and they're dressing out. They're in a hazmat suit. I'm not kidding. So you can imagine these Egyptians are just covered up with it. Now, up until now, the magicians of Egypt had been able to reproduce the plagues, but now the ability had been stopped. And I'm just going to tell you right here, those sorcerers, magicians, whatever you would like to call them, they were given their abilities by Satan. But God is more powerful than Satan, and he was not going to let them reproduce any other plague after the last one. So this one, there was nothing they could do. Now this plague challenged Geb, G-E-B, the god of the earth. By turning the dust of the earth into gnats or lice, this plague challenged Geb directly at the core of his domain, the earth itself. So see, he's striking at these different idols that they worship. Now, in Exodus 8:16, as we continue, again Adonai said to Moses, get up early in the morning, stand before Pharaoh when he comes out to the water, and say to him, here is what Adonai says. Let my people go, so that they can worship me. Otherwise, if you won't let my people go, I will send swarms of insects on you, your servants and your people, and into your houses. The houses of the Egyptians will be full of swarms of insects, and likewise the ground they stand on. But I will set apart the land of Goshen. Now this is the first time he mentions the land of Goshen. Okay? Where my people live. No swarms of insects will be there. So that you can realize that I am Adonai right here in the land. Yes, I will distinguish between my people and your people, and this sign will happen by tomorrow. So, of course, the next day, the terrible swarms of insects went into the Pharaoh's palace and into all the servants' houses, and they ruined the entire land of Egypt. This plague of flies, which invaded Egypt, is sometimes linked to Khafre as a symbolic challenge to his domain over creation and order. Again, Pharaoh asked for intercession, and Adonai complied, only for Pharaoh to once again go back on his word. Once again, in Exodus 9, Adonai said to Moses, go to Pharaoh and tell him, here is what Adonai, the God of the Hebrews, says. Let my people go so that they can worship me. If you refuse to let them go and persist in holding on to them, the hand of Adonai is on your livestock in the field, on the horses, donkeys, camels, cattle, and flocks, and will make them suffer a devastating illness. But Adonai will distinguish between Egypt and Israel's livestock. Nothing belonging to the people of Israel will die. Tomorrow we'll do this in the land. Now, God's making promises, and He so far has delivered on every one of them. And again, the livestock died. Now, as a lover of animals, this kind of hurts my heart. Because, I don't know. If I had a baby lamb, I would have a hard time, parting with it. And if
Well, it would be your animals.
True. So these people this was their food source. Some of them actually worshipped some of these types of animals. So for these animals to suddenly die was devastating. And Pharaoh investigated. It's in 7th verse. Pharaoh investigated and found that not even one of the animals of the people of Israel had died. Nevertheless, Pharaoh's heart remained stubborn. Now, in ancient Egypt, the god associated with livestock, particularly bulls, was Apis. Apis was not just any bull. He was seen as a living manifestation of the god Ptah. And I think I'm saying that correctly. Ptah, Ptah. The creator god of Memphis, and later also linked with Osiris, the god of the afterlife. The Apis bull was revered for its association with strength, fertility, and the rejuvenation of life. Have you noticed that a lot of these gods had cross functions? So I guess you were covered whichever one you worshipped with strength and fertility. Now in Exodus 9:8, Adonai said to Moses and Aaron, "Take handfuls of ashes from a kiln." And he didn't even specify which kiln, just a kiln. "And let Moses throw them in the air before Pharaoh's eyes. They will turn into fine dust over all the land of Egypt and become infected sores on men and animals throughout Egypt." So they took from the kiln, stood in front of Pharaoh, and threw them in the air, and everyone in the room became infected except them. And animals, any animals that weren't dead, became infected with these sores and boils also. And of course, the magicians couldn't even stand. They were just like falling over on the ground and wailing in pain. Have you ever had a boil? It's like one of the most painful things you can have. It really is. But, again, it didn't make any difference to Pharaoh. The plague of boils also indirectly challenged other Egyptian gods associated with healing, such as Imhotep, Thoth, and Nefertim. Now, Imhotep, I've actually heard that one mentioned in movies, several movies. So, God's kind of getting all of them, even some of the lesser ones here. And again, in 9:22, Adonai said to Moses, "Reach out your hand towards the sky, so that there will be hail in all the land of Egypt, falling on people, animals, and everything growing in the field throughout the land of Egypt." So Moses reached out his staff towards the sky, and Adonai sent thunder and hail and fire. So have you ever been reading that and you skipped over the fire part? Because I have. Yeah, the fire. Now that would be just, and it ran down to the earth. It didn't just suddenly break out on the face of the earth. This fire was coming from the heavens. So it hailed and fire flashed up with the hail, and it was terrible, worse than any hailstorm in all of Egypt since it became a nation. Throughout all the land of Egypt, the hail struck everything in the field, people and animals, and the hail struck every plant growing in the field and broke every tree. But in the land of Goshen, where the people of Israel were, there was no hail. So Goshen was the place to be. And then in Exodus 10:12, location. Exodus 10:12, Adonai said to Moses, reach out your hand over the land of Egypt so that locusts will invade the land and eat every plant that the hail has left. Now I'm going to tell you, hey, really big locusts, they're like this big. So we're not, somewhere between this and this. That's how big they are. And they're big bodied and they're pretty heavy insects. And so the air was just thick with these things. I mean, the ground was covered. They were crawling on everything. And they will bite you. The locusts will bite you. And these things just came over them. And it had been an invasion more severe than they had ever before or will ever be again. This is what the word says. So you know what I also say? Thank goodness for insecticide. Okay. Not one green thing remained. Not a tree, not a plant in the field in all the land of Egypt. Now you had to ask yourself, did Pharaoh and his people go around and say, hey, by the way, these things are going to be happening? Because I can't imagine that they did. So a lot of these people were just completely surprised. They didn't even know what was going on. They just knew that suddenly these things were happening. Now the locusts were associated with Seth, the god of storms and chaos, and potentially Men, the god of fertility and vegetation, or maybe Isis, the goddess of life. The locust plague, as the 8th plague, targeted these deities, highlighting their inability to protect the land from devastation. So he's culling out a few more of these worshipped deities. In Exodus 10:21, Adonai goes to Moses and he says, reach out your hand toward the sky and there will be darkness over the land of Egypt, darkness so thick it can be felt. Moses reached out his hand towards the sky and there was a thick darkness in the entire land of Egypt for 3 days. People couldn't see each other and no one went anywhere for 3 days. Okay, so now you're sitting at home. Suddenly this darkness overcomes you. It's so dark, it's like you can feel it touching you. You cannot light anything you try to light. There's no light that comes out. I mean, there's nothing. And you don't know where your water is. I mean, it's in the kitchen, but can you get there? You can't find your well outside because if you go outside, you're going to get lost. Because you can't see anything. These people were stuck in place for 3 days, which means they were not eating nor were they drinking. Babies their diapers couldn't be changed. I mean, it was a total standstill of that nation. But all the people of Israel had lights in their homes. Can you imagine if you were just right across that line, Egypt to Goshen, and you're looking over there and you're like, I think I can see some light, but maybe not. Maybe I should crawl over towards Goshen. You don't know. These people had to be going nuts. And I'm telling you, they didn't know. They didn't know at this point what was going on. Pharaoh wasn't out there telling them. Our government doesn't tell us anything. Why should Pharaoh tell theirs? Now, Ra, which you've also probably heard in movies, he was the sun god. And they also relied on him for their well-being and saw him as a source of security and life. He's one of the biggies. And the darkness highlighted their dependence on God and the vulnerability of the deities. Now, for the 10th plague, we must remember that Pharaoh told Moses he never wanted to see his face again. Moses was like, fine with me. But I'm going to read that. Here is what Adonai says. About midnight I will go out into Egypt, and all the firstborn in the land of Egypt will die, from the firstborn of Pharaoh sitting on his throne to the firstborn of the slave girl at the handmill, and all the firstborn of the livestock. There will be a horrendous wailing throughout all the land of Egypt. There has never been another like it, and there never will be again. Now, do you think this 10th and final plague inflicted upon Egypt is a consequence of Pharaoh's refusal to release the Israelites from slavery is also, remember when Moses was a baby and they were killing all the babies? Do you think that might have had something to do with it too? You were killing all my kids, my people. Just wondering. Not saying it's true, just saying possibility. The plague was a direct act of God demonstrating his power and sovereignty over all creation, including the Egyptian gods. Do you think we as Christians are exempt from idols? Now, we don't have these hand-carved wooden or stone ones. Now, there are religions that do, but as Christians we're told not to have any idols, so we don't try to chisel out a likeness of Yeshua, and we don't try to have an exact likeness of the Father. They're portrayed by actors in movies, but they're not him. So we've seen what the punishment in the Old Testament is for having idols. Even when Aaron built the cow at Sinai, those people were severely punished to death because they had made an idol. But now we're living under grace. But does that mean we're okay with having idols? No. Now, let's discuss what some of the modern idols are. Common examples include money, power, reputation, physical appearance, relationships, entertainment, and even the pursuit of safety and security. But essentially, it's anything that shifts our focus from God and His will that can be considered a modern idol. So I'm kind of going to go through some of these things I listed so we can kind of see what the Bible had to say about them, okay? So let's take a look at these, and we're going to start with material possessions, which can also be, you can't have material possessions unless you pursue wealth. Because, if you max out a bunch of credit cards, they're just going to come after you and they're going to take all the stuff away anyway. Mostly possessions are status symbols. And accumulating possessions can become a central focus, and then it overshadows your spiritual growth. And in Jeremiah 2:11-13, apparently they were having this exact thing happen back then in Jeremiah's time. So this is what he said. Has a nation ever exchanged its gods, and theirs are not gods at all? Yet my people have exchanged their glory for something without value. Be aghast at this, you heavens. Shudder in absolute horror, says Adonai. For my people have committed two evils. They have abandoned me, the fountain of living water, and dug themselves cisterns, broken cisterns that can hold no water. So he's talking about the idols that they were worshiping back then. Now, I do want to tell you that my verses are coming out of the Complete Jewish Bible, so it's not going to sound like the NIV. But if you have the NIV, it means the same thing. Okay. Again, in Matthew 6:19 through 34, do not lay up for yourselves treasures on earth, where moth and rust destroy, and where thieves break in and steal. But lay up for yourself treasures in heaven, where neither moth nor rust destroys, and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will also be. Well, so what does that mean for the individual? Well, first I want to say, since these are being addressed in the New Testament, so the Lord knew that these things were going to come up, so He's given us answers about what to do about these things. Not that these haven't always been present, Old Testament or New Testament, but still, they were having these exact issues back then. Now, number one, what it means for the individual is it's going to hinder your spiritual growth and create spiritual apathy. I know from my own experiences when I was showing dogs that it was all about the dogs. Showing the dogs, spending the money on the dogs, going to with the dogs every weekend to show them, or do something else with the dogs on the weekends. It was always about the dogs. They were my idol, okay? So they were not just my idol, they were also my pride, and they were also my what I loved the most. But if you think of them as possessions, that was my materialism, okay? And materialism can create a false sense of security and self-sufficiency. Man, I felt really, like I was doing something. And it blinds the individual to your true spiritual needs, which it definitely did. It could lead to lukewarm faith. Yes, it did. Where material wealth is prioritized over a relationship with God. Yes, it did. The pursuit of possessions can distract from spiritual disciplines like prayer, Bible study, and fellowship, hindering spiritual growth. Yes, it did. I can say, yes, it did to all of those things in my case. Now, when material possessions become the focus of life, they can replace God as the object of worship, devotion, so then it becomes an idol. This is a form of idolatry, which is a sin against God. Materialism also distorts life's purpose, and it often leads to a focus on earthly possessions and fleeting pleasures rather than on eternal values like serving God. It can create a sense of emptiness and dissatisfaction even among those who are materially wealthy. The Bible emphasizes that true joy and purpose come from seeking God and fulfilling His will, not from accumulating wealth. Now, when you pursue wealth or material items, it can foster a greed within yourself, which also and towards others, and it leads to selfishness and a lack of compassion for others. It can lead to a focus on self-interest, neglecting the needs of others, and potentially damaging relationships with loved ones. Some interpretations of the Bible suggest that materialism can even contribute to injustice and exploitation of the poor. Remember, the Pharisees did just this to the nation. Remember, Jesus got all over them about that. Not treating the poor right, not the widows, not the orphans, being greedy and selfish. Now, sometimes we have status symbols, whether material possessions, titles, or social positions. It can shift focus and affections from God to the symbols themselves. When prioritizing or defining worth by these symbols, they can be elevated to the status of idols. This diverts worship and devotion away from the Creator towards the idol. Now, an idol can be a lot of different things. Okay? It's the thing that diverts your attention away from God. The Bible warns against pride and emphasizes humility. Seeking and flaunting status symbols can fuel pride, leading to comparisons with others. And true spiritual status in God's eyes is marked by humility, faithfulness, and a heart aligned with God's will, not outward displays of wealth or possession. Now, we all know that humility is not like keeping your head down and saying yes sir, no sir, and acting like a doormat. That's not humility. Humility is knowing who God is and having faith in Him to take care of you, and that humility to bend to what God wants you to do. That's the humility that we're talking about. And having these idols in your life creates a barrier to God's grace. It puts a barrier between you and Him. Pride, often fueled by the pursuit of status symbols, opposes God's nature. The Bible says, God opposes the proud but gives grace to the humble. James 4:6. A focus on worldly status can prevent humbling oneself before God and receiving His grace and favor according to the set-apart heart, which is a particular group. Now, I have to say, have you ever met someone who said, "Do you know who I am?" I met a few doctors who did that. "Do you know who I am?" "No, I don't. Where's your badge?" Because you're not coming in here if you don't have one. But there are politicians and other people who will, throw that at you. Actors and actresses, we've all heard about them trying to do that too. Do you know who I am? That's that pride of self. You become your own status symbol. So, status symbols prioritize the temporary over the eternal. They represent worldly possessions and accolades which are temporary. Yeshua taught, "Do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth." I've already read this one, but I'm going to read it again. "Where moth and rust destroy, where thieves break in and steal, but store up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where neither moth nor rust destroys, where thieves do not break in or steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart also will be." And then again in Matthew 6:19 through 21, that was Matthew 6:19 through 21. Pursuing status symbols can distract from focusing on eternal spiritual riches and building a lasting relationship with God. Now, along with that, again, you have that potential for exploitation and injustice. Historically, and even today, social hierarchies and status symbols can lead to the oppression and exploitation of the vulnerable. While the Bible acknowledges social hierarchies exist, it also calls for the protection of the poor and the weak and warns against the abuse of power. God loves us. He's tried to set up a law that protects everybody, even women. I mean, children, the women who are widows, and if you're a man who's widowed and you can't take care of yourself anymore, you need to be protected too. A fixation on status can foster elitism and disregard for those perceived as lower, which is contrary to the Christian values of love, compassion, and serving others. I have to say, in this country, that does often happen. I'm not happy about it. I think we could do more. But I also think that the way that some people try to go about it is decisive as opposed to being supportive of those individuals. In essence, while symbols themselves aren't inherently evil, the repercussions arise when they become the focus of our lives, competing with God for affection, fueling pride, and overshadowing humility, faith. I'm sorry, I'm getting a little dry, y'all. And eternal values. Let me get a drink. Now, we all want a good reputation, but we do not want a false reputation. And we all know that person who tries to exude that whole, I'm a Christian, let me pray for you, but behind closed doors, you hear the curses, the dirty stories, the things that as a Christian person yourself, you're looking at them and you're going, I'm getting opposing reputations here. So we do not want that kind of reputation. But a good reputation is valuable, and believers are ultimately called to find their identity and worth in Christ, not in the opinion of others. So our mission is to, 1 Peter 2:12, encourage believers to live such good lives among the pagans that though they accuse you of doing wrong, they may see your good deeds and glorify God on the day He visits us. So we do not need to be puffed up in pride at our reputation. We want real, solid reputations, not the false one. So you got to watch out what you do behind the closed doors with your special friends, because let me tell you, them special friends will sell you out in a second. So you need to always be on your toes and be conscious of the fact that you're not here to impress them with your stories or your whatever. You're here to impress the Lord with your faith and your humbleness and things like that. Now, physical appearance. Now, you've got those people out there, especially these days, who live in a plastic surgeon's office. Okay? I've known a lot of people, they get the Botox on the regular schedule, they get and I don't care if you get Botox, I really don't. I mean, as things go, big whoop. And also, Botox has its good medical applications in other areas besides making your face stiff. But, these people they're like starting from the head and going down on these bodies, so they have these perfect physical appearance. Some people even try to make themselves look like the Barbie doll or the Ken doll or their favorite actor or actress. They want their lips big. They want their lips small. You never know. I've seen it all. Oh, I just made a rhyme. I didn't mean to do that. But anyway. But I have seen it all. I've seen all of those things. And then you have, the person who looks down at you because you're not in Dior. You're not carrying the status symbol purse of the moment. You're not wearing Louboutins. Louboutins, is that how you say it? I mean, good grief. I can't even imagine standing in those things. Their heels are this high, and I'm not kidding. You're on your tiptoes. But that's their thing. That's their physical appearance. Now, a little makeup, some jewelry, God has no issue with that. Hair long, hair short. Your hair's your glory. So just make it shine, whatever length you like it at. Make it look good. But in 1 Samuel 16:7, this is a key passage. It states, "For the Lord sees not as a man sees. Man looks on the outward appearance, but the Lord looks on the heart." This means that God is primarily concerned with a person's internal state, including their thoughts, intentions, and their relationship with Him. Personally, I would put relationship with Him first. I should have redone that, because it's your relationship with Him, then your thoughts and intentions. While God acknowledges physical appearance, He doesn't judge based on it. In 1 Peter 3:3-4, encourage believers to focus on the unfading beauty of a gentle and quiet spirit. Y'all, I'm going to have to work on that one. Gentle and quiet, I am not. Rather than outward adornment. The Bible doesn't say it's wrong to care about your appearance. And in the time that Yeshua was walking the earth, women actually had their own beauty centers. They would go get their hair done. Their makeup was a little bit more permanent. You went like once a week and had it done. They even painted on their hands. They did their nails. They wore pretty jewelry. I mean, they took care of themselves. They rubbed oils into if they could afford them, they rubbed oils into their bodies so that they would smell good. And never once is any of these people pointed out as being something wrong with them for doing it. Not once. The men even rubbed oils into their skin to smell good. And they wore makeup. And they had their hair done. I mean, and they probably had their beards done too, because some of them wore those little shiny things in their beards, pieces of jewelry. It was a status thing. When my nephew does it, I just kind of go, ooh, I don't like it. I mean, it's just a personal thing, but I don't know. It has no. I mean, I don't care if they do it, but to look, I don't know. It's not something I would do if I had a beard. So, a person's physical appearance can reflect their inner state. And taking care of one's body can be a way of honoring God. Like, you wouldn't want to show up at church smelling like you just came off a day of mowing the yard. The key is to maintain a balance, prioritizing inner beauty and character while not neglecting outward presentation. In essence, the Bible encourages a perspective that values inner qualities over outward appearance, reminding believers that God sees beyond the surface and focuses on the heart. Now, in this day and time, it's hard to find the person who has not had a relationship that wasn't godly. And I say hard, but not completely impossible. Romans 13 and 14, I mean, I'm talking about the whole books. I'm not going to really read out of that. Read them, because they are very, they got everything peppered in there about the do's and don'ts of relationships. Okay? But overall, these two chapters instruct us to love one another as neighbors, to avoid causing others to stumble spiritually, to work for the good of the souls of others. So, you don't covet your neighbor, but you're nice to your neighbor. If they need something, you help them out. Paul names sexual immorality, which is sexual activity outside of marriage, as an example of the very opposite of such love. You cannot put a relationship with another individual over God. Okay? So, when you marry, it's holy, and God is all in for that, and He does not see it as a barrier between you and Him. It's okay. It's good. But when you take an individual you are not married to, and you're having a relationship with that person, it does put a barrier between him and you, because it is a sin in His eyes, and therefore the barrier is up. None of us wants a barrier between God and yourself. You can't get anywhere with that barrier there. And you will find that you will have some of the things that I mentioned with materialism, that apathy, you don't want to read the word, all those things are going to hit you because of the barrier. Now, I'm going to talk about safety and security. We all desire safety and security. People who've actually had to live without that in their lives, they lived in a home that was not safe, they lived in a home that was not secure, they are actually going to desire it even more than those of us who grew up in safe homes. And so there is a difference in wanting safety and security because you had to live without it before in your life. And it's not wrong to want safety and security. However, Psalms 23:4 speaks of walking through the darkest valley with no fear, as God is present and comforting. So some people who come from homes that did not have that safety and security, that is actually something that you need to help them learn. Because it's not going to come natural to them to just let God work for them. In Isaiah 26:3, it states that God keeps those in perfect peace whose minds are stayed. And in 2 Timothy 4:18, it speaks of God rescuing believers from every evil attack. Again, people who have physically been attacked by people that supposedly love them, they're going to have difficulty with these things. And you're going to have to help them through these things and to establish that God really is that place of safety and He really is that safety place of security. And while the Bible acknowledges the need for physical safety, because it does, it emphasizes that true and lasting security is found in a relationship with God, trusting in His protection and promises. And it takes time. I mean, I never had any of the issues of fearing where I lived and how I lived and what was going to go on in my life because I had great parents and they took care of me and I lived with them all through college and they paid my bills and they gave me gas so I could get to college and back. But there are people out there who do not have any of that. And so for them to find that relationship with God is more difficult. And if someone comes in here, you just got to help them through it and not condemn them for anything or, I don't understand why you can't get this. It's hard and it's difficult and it's hard to let go and everything. Okay. So we all pretty much, well, actually, I have quit watching TV. I just really don't watch TV at all anymore. If I'm going to entertain myself, I'm going to read a book. Okay. Which still, I have to watch what I read. But this is all under entertainment. Now, it doesn't matter if it's gaming, watching TV, movies, games, any kind of games, board games, whatever. Anything that you do for entertainment. The scriptures warn against content that promotes lust, violence, greed, and other sins. Now, I don't know about y'all, but I've at least heard enough about a lot of the games that people play, Halo and Fortnite and all of that. And it seems like they all, especially, do violence and greed. I don't know if they promote lust because, I don't know. But I do know there are games out there that do. So, and other violent acts. So, these are things that have no place in your home, your child's home, your grandchild's home. They're not okay. They're not, they don't know the difference, blah, blah, blah. Yes, it teaches them to be violent people. It teaches them to want to have lustful thoughts. I have known a child, 15 years old, playing these games, and the next thing you know, he's looking at porno on his phone. 15. Parents cannot even let him have his phone anymore. So all these things go hand in hand to leading kids down a road of massive, horrible sin. Now, not all of them end up that way, but there's a good majority that do, in one way or another. In 1 Corinthians 15:33, it reminds believers that bad company corrupts good character. And in Proverbs 14:12 and 13, cautions against foolish pleasures. So ultimately, all activities, including entertainment, should be done in a way that honors and glorifies God, as stated in Colossians 3:17. Christians should engage in regular self-reflection to assess their entertainment choices and ensure they align with their faith. Okay? So when I pick up a book, I have to make sure it aligns with my faith. And every once in a while I am surprised and I'm like, shut the book. Shut the book. Not reading any more of that. And it's because you never know when someone's going to slip something in there. But you stick to the good stuff, and you will still be entertained, and it's not lustful or violent and all that. Christians should remember Proverbs 4:23, which reminds believers to guard their hearts, as what enters the mind can influence behavior and spiritual well-being. It's essential to develop the ability to discern between entertainment that edifies and entertainment that can be harmful or distracting. In essence, the Bible encourages Christians to approach entertainment with wisdom, moderation, and a focus on glorifying God in all things. So, if as Christians we focus our lives on the idols listed, and really anything that takes your focus off the kingdom of God and to worldly pursuit, you can guarantee that your relationship with Yeshua will suffer. You must always focus on your relationship with Yeshua. Talk with him daily. Make getting to know him your daily routine. Study the word, pray, ask for guidance. Because as we all know in John 3:16, this is worded just a little bit different because it does come out of the Jewish Bible, complete Jewish Bible. For God so loved the world that he gave his only and unique Son, so that everyone who trusts in him may have eternal life instead of being utterly destroyed. For God did not send the Son into the world to judge the world, but rather so that through him the world might be saved. Those who trust in him are not judged. Those who do not trust have been judged already, and that they have not trusted in the one who is God's only and unique Son. Now this is the judgment. The light has come into the world, but people loved the darkness rather than the light. Why? Because their actions were wicked. For everyone who does evil things hates the light and avoids it, so that his actions won't be exposed. But everyone who does what is true comes to the light, so that all may see that his actions are accomplished through God. In closing, I want to say, what we all want in the end is to hear, "Well done, my good and faithful servant." What we do not want to hear is, "I never knew you. Depart from me, you workers of lawlessness."